J absolutely has to be for Jesus Christ. I mean, it's the center of why we're here. I mean, if it wasn't about Jesus Christ, you'd be listening to a regular version of the A to Z of relationships if it exists. But we're listening to the godly A to Z of relationships. And so we do place him at the center, or do we? Is Jesus Christ front and center of all that you do and all that you believe? Or is he an optional add-on for you when you're feeling a bit low and things aren't working out as you'd like them to, and then you call on him? Or are you the opposite, actually? Do you rejoice with him, and when you're feeling good and you're feeling excited or something's going well for you, then you spend time with Jesus, but when things aren't going so well, then you begin to question and you go silent? Which one are you? Or is it somewhere in the middle? I'm somewhere in the middle, because I'm not perfect. And so there are times when God is front and center of everything. And there's times when I rush off into something and have not consulted with Jesus. Which one are you? In the Bible, it talks about a single woman concerns herself with the things of the Lord, whereas a married woman concerns herself with the things of the world and how she may please her husband. I was told as a single woman to prepare myself. God's exact words to me were, be a wife before you're a wife. That made no sense to me. None. I wrestled with it for a good few days. How can I be a wife if I don't have a husband? It made no sense. And so I went back to God and said, God, what do you mean? What do you mean? But what happened, and I didn't hear an audible answer, if you like, but what began to happen in me was I began to feel more like a wife, if you like. Before that, I was conducting my life very much as a single person. The selfishness was on another level. I mean, I can't begin to explain to you how selfish I had become, because for a very long time I had lived alone. And so I hadn't had to think about anybody else. By all means, I do things for people if they needed help, and I was serving in the church and I was doing all of those things. But what I wasn't doing, especially in my home setting, was considering others, because I didn't have to. And I wasn't living that life where I had lots of friends coming over, people coming to visit, people turning up at my door. I literally did everything for myself. So even when I went shopping, I would buy enough of an item so that if I wanted to have one every day, I could. And it would last until the next time I was going shopping. And so my level of selfishness, without intending to, it rose very, very high, because I had become trained to think for one. So when Jesus was saying to me, be a wife before you're a wife, I had to change my way of thinking. I had to begin to think outside of myself. I had to behave as if I already had somebody in my life. I had to consider others the way that I would my husband coming in. But more than anything, what God showed me very soon after he gave me that statement was, he called me to be a wife to him first. And he showed me in Isaiah 54, where it says, your maker is your husband. The day I got that revelation, I was vexed. I can't begin to explain to you how upset I was, because I interpreted that to mean that I wasn't going to have an earthly husband, and I was going to be married to God like a nun for the rest of my life. And I wasn't feeling that. So I became very low. I didn't understand what God was saying to me. I didn't want to understand it. I didn't want to hear it. I wasn't interested, and I kind of just distanced myself. I mean, albeit briefly, I didn't go off the rails and I didn't backslide, but I just didn't want to hear it. Not what I wanted to hear at all. Until God persevered with me and gave me deeper understanding to what he was saying. And I kept reading the scripture, being prayerful, fasting, and saying, God, explain to me what you mean, because you didn't give me a desire to be a wife and a mother to then tell me that I'm going to be a wife to you and that's it. So you need to break this down for me. I mean, I probably didn't say it like that, because this is God we're talking about. But what then happened was God explained to me, and he broke it down for me, the understanding of the scripture whereby God, the things that are required of you in marriage. I mean, we can all think of the number one, the first thing that anybody says to have a successful marriage. Come on. Communication. And God is showing me, well, if you can't communicate with me on a regular basis to form the friendship and relationship that we will have one day, and which will continue to grow and expand and deepen, how are you looking to be married? If you can't obey me when I ask you to do something, and it takes you 6 months to even revisit the message that I've given you before you even think about doing what I've asked you to do, how are you looking to be in a marriage? If you can't come under the authority that I place in my word, in my church, in the people that are over you, if you struggle with that, how, as a woman, are you going to come under the authority of your husband? Yeah, silence. Because this is going to be hitting home for some of you as well. But it hit me like a ton of bricks. Because when God said to me, be a wife, I'm thinking, do I need to iron more? Do I need to be cooking more meals? He wasn't talking about the practical stuff. He was talking about the spiritual, emotional, and mental things that we sometimes close ourselves off to. And if I couldn't do those things first and foremost with my maker, who knows me more than I know myself, how on earth was I going to do that with a earthly husband? It just made no sense. And so that's when I got my revelation that being a wife before I'm a wife meant that I need to be a wife to my maker first and foremost.